Welcome to the Growth Spurt, a weekly AI podcast by the Second Baptist Church of Ann Arbor. Today, we are undertaking a deep dive, looking closely at the conclusion of the Difficult Conversation series. This was delivered back on October 12, 2025, by Dr. Stephen J. Daniels, Sr.
That's right. The sermon itself was titled simply, Can We Talk?
A question we probably avoid too much. Our mission here is really to pull out let's call it the universal protocol Dr. Daniels laid out for handling conflict. Because his core idea is, honestly, is pretty gripping. He says, yeah, the conversation might feel heavy, or it might be unpleasant.
Sure.
But like way too often, it's actually us, our pride, maybe our fear, how we prep for it. That's what makes the conversation really difficult, sometimes impossible even.
That's such a key distinction to make right at the start. We're unpacking this scriptural protocol. It's mainly from Matthew 18, verses 15 to 20.
Okay.
And to really get the weight of these verses, you have to remember the context. It's not like Jesus was just, giving a calm lecture on manners.
Oh, right. I remember reading that in the notes. The disciples were actually, arguing?
Arguing, yeah, exactly. And not just politely discussing seating arrangements. They were full-on arguing about which one of them was the greatest in the kingdom.
Wow, okay.
So Jesus had to pivot right there on the spot. He starts teaching these core principles for resolving conflict because, well, he knew disagreements happen. They're inevitable, even among his closest followers.
So this sermon isn't just about, good etiquette.
Not at all. It's about providing real, essential tools for dealing with what Dr. Daniels called the hard stuff that happens between people.
Okay, before we even jump into the actual steps from Matthew, the sermon did this incredible, almost psychological breakdown of what we do before we even open our mouths.
The emotional warfare part, yes.
That phrase really landed.
Yeah.
We put ourselves through this exhausting internal battle before the real conversation even kicks off.
It's where we just bleed energy, isn't it? Dr. Daniels, he really detailed that internal scripting we do. You're practicing your poker face in the mirror, perfecting your comebacks, playing out every single potential scenario in your head.
Yeah.
It's that classic loop, okay, when she says this, I'm definitely going to say that.
Right. You're trying to anticipate every move, shoot down arguments they haven't even thought of yet.
And what's the point of all that? We're trying to control it, right? Control the outcome.
Yeah, trying to eliminate surprises, trying not to feel vulnerable. But we just end up completely drained before we even start.
Precisely. We're fighting a phantom conversation. And the notes pointed out something interesting. We get so worked up for this imaginary verbal smackdown that often the real conversation, when it happens, it doesn't even go near the places we thought it would. We've burned ourselves out before getting to the starting line.
So all that prep is often counterproductive.
It can be. Yeah. And what's even more critical is this realization he highlighted. The actual problem, the issue, the burden, whatever it is, it just stays there. It's completely static until someone, the mature believer, chooses to break that pattern.
Change doesn't happen until someone finally musters up the courage, the gumption to just say, okay, enough. We need to talk.
Exactly.
And that phrase, can we talk? It sounds so simple, but the sermon argues it takes, a lot. Courage, definitely. Vulnerability, humility, prayer even.
Because the alternative path is so much easier, so tempting.
What's that?
The ineffective but often preferred method. Just get defensive, shut the person out completely. Or, as the sermon kind of humorously put it, you let everyone else know how offended you are first.
The classic tell the world except the person involved.
Or
the 4 seasons method of avoidance he mentioned.
Right, the 4 seasons, which for anyone listening who hasn't heard that, it means basically a whole year, sometimes more, of just intentional silence, passive aggression, subtle avoidance.
Letting the relationship just freeze over.
Yeah. And the moment we choose that path, anger, hurt, pulling away, instead of starting the difficult talk, we've picked the defensive route. And that guarantees nothing actually changes. The core issue Dr. Daniels kept hitting was the initiative needed to actually resolve things.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. Yeah. So let's unpack this kingdom protocol now. Starting with that first very direct instruction, Matthew 18.15. If another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense.
And this first step imposes 2 really non-negotiable requirements.
Which are?
Confidentiality And expedition. Go privately and go quickly.
Let's take confidentiality first. That seems crucial.
It's like the protective wall around the whole process. The sermon made a really powerful point here, almost you could say radical, about the danger if you skip this.
Okay.
If the offended person shares what happened with others first, before talking to the person who actually caused the offense, the sermon defines that action as basically a form of gossiping.
Whoa, okay, hang on. I need to push back there a little because I imagine some listeners might immediately think, wait a minute, if I'm hurt, don't I have a right to talk to a trusted friend for support or advice? Why is sharing my hurt called gossip?
And that's the challenging shift in perspective, isn't it? We usually think gossip is, spreading dirt about someone else's life.
Right.
But in this specific context, it's about spreading your personal conflict, your feelings, your side of the story, without the other person even knowing there is an issue from your perspective. The sermon brought up Proverbs 16.28. A troublemaker plants seeds of strife, and gossip separates the best of friends.
So the implication is the moment you bring in a third party before talking to the source, you're maybe choosing validation over actual resolution. You're looking for a co-signer.
That's exactly the framing. You're looking for someone to co-sign your pain, your anger, and doing that just poisons the well before you've even tried to clean it.
How so?
Well, think about it. Sharing the conflict with others first. It immediately puts the supposed offender on the defensive if or when they find out. Their first reaction is likely, why didn't they come to me first? Why tell everyone else?
Yeah, I could see that.
It's not just like a spiritual rule either. It's a pretty universal principle for de-escalation, right? Bringing in new people before the main parties talk just ramps up the tension, the relationship, the issue. It's a private matter initially, not something for, public debate or social media drama.
Okay, that makes the rule of the road really clear. People outside the immediate conflict shouldn't know all the details and feelings before the person who supposedly caused it does. Makes sense. But let's hit the second part of step 1 expedition. Speed.
Yes. The word is go. It's active. It means don't sit on it. Act fast.
Okay.
And this highlights that other crucial point about initiative. The work, the going. It has to be started by the person who feels offended. This is like the strong meat of the teaching, not just the easy milk. You can't just wait around hoping the other person figures it out and comes to you, especially because, let's be honest, they might be completely oblivious. They might have no idea they're wearing the offender label in your mind.
That feels hard. Because the burden falls squarely on the person who's already hurting, who feels wronged. Why is it their job to initiate? Why does the work fall on the one who's, ticked off?
Because, fundamentally, the person who lacks peace is the one suffering the most in that situation. The sermon put it very bluntly and insightfully, I thought. The offender sleeps better than you do.
Ouch. But probably true.
Right. Your lack of peace becomes the sort of internal motivation, the currency required to start the work. If you just wait for the other person, you're guaranteeing the issue continues and you stay uncomfortable.
So this first step, initiated by the offended, done privately, done quickly, it's really the necessary prelude to any kind of restoration.
Exactly. And if it works, if the person listens, maybe confesses or explains, and you resolve it, the relationship is, as the scripture says, won back, or at least convinced to start making things right again.
Okay. But we know life isn't always that smooth. What happens if that first private conversation, well, if it doesn't work, if it fails?
Right. That leads directly into step 2 and this idea of continual pursuit. Matthew 18.1 scene says, essentially, take 1 or 2 others with you and go back again.
Go back again. That shows real resolve, persistence.
It does. And this is the witness protocol. It's very specific. You take 1 or 2 others, which means, importantly, no more than 4 people involved total. You, the offender, and 1 or 2 witnesses.
Okay, 1 or 2. Not a whole crowd.
Definitely not a crowd. And their role is specific, too. They're there for clarity, not combustion.
Clarity, not combustion. I like that.
Nah.
But how do you pick people who can actually be unbiased witnesses? Isn't it just human nature for them to kind of lean toward the person who brought them into it? How do you keep the process honest?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? The notes emphasize this strongly. The witnesses are there specifically to hear and confirm everything that's said.
Like just to verify the facts of the conversation later.
Exactly. So there's no dispute afterwards about, well, he said this or no, she said that. They aren't there to act like your backup, like a gang, or just to automatically co-sign your point of view.
So they need certain qualities.
Absolutely. They need to be people respected, ideally, by both sides. They need to be able to listen without jumping to conclusions. And crucially, they need to have the integrity, the basic decency to keep the whole thing confidential. If they gossip later, you've broken the process.
If they fail in any of those points, the whole step 2 is kind of compromised.
It is. It violates the intent.
And notice, again, the burden to initiate this second meeting with witnesses still falls on the offended party. It keeps reinforcing that idea. If you want healing, if you want peace, you have to be resolved to see it through, even if it means going back.
You're fighting for your own peace, really, not just for them to admit they were wrong.
Okay, so step 1, go alone, privately, quickly. Step 2, if that fails, go again with 1 or 2 witnesses for clarity. What if that still doesn't work?
Then you get to step 3. If the second attempt, even with witnesses, fails to bring resolution, the instruction is the case goes to the church. Matthew 18:17.
So to the church.
Yes. And the sermon really warned against skipping steps, just jumping straight from being offended to like banning someone, cutting them off, ending the relationship, what Dr. Daniels called termination.
Right.
Doing that just completely eliminates step 1 and step 2.
Right.
And that's often why issues blow up and get so entrenched and difficult later on. The whole protocol is designed in a way to prevent that kind of unilateral, immediate termination. It forces a process.
Okay, this next part is really interesting because the sermon tackled a verse or verses that I think many of us use all the time, maybe incorrectly.
Ah, you mean Matthew 18:19-20, about where 2 or 3 gather.
Exactly. We quote that all the time, usually assuming it's just about, corporate prayer, power, asking God for stuff together.
Yeah, it's often pulled out and used that way. But if you read it right there in its proper place, the entire passage, starting way back at verse 15, is about conflict resolution.
The whole thing.
The whole context is settling disputes between believers. So when it talks about 2 or 3 touching and agreeing on anything,
It's about agreeing on the conflict settlement.
that's the direct context. It's about the offended and the offender hopefully coming together, maybe with those witnesses, getting on the same page, agreeing on how this conflict will be settled in love, how restoration will happen. That's when they bind or loose the matter. They basically settle the mess. And God confirms that agreement, that resolution in heaven.
Wow. So it's about agreeing on reconciliation and closure, not just agreeing on, general prayer requests. That shifts things.
It really does, and it leads to that vital contrast Dr. Daniels presented at the end. The choice between just terminating things without real closure, think of a messy breakup or a job firing or even a divorce where things were never truly hashed out and settled, versus going through the hard work, the difficult conversation, following the steps, and reaching some kind of conclusive agreement. Even if sometimes that agreement is simply to respectfully disagree and move forward separately, but with peace and closure.
Closure being the key.
Absolutely. And forgiveness in this whole framework, it's rooted in remembering that Christ forgives us constantly, daily. That realization should empower us to extend grace, even when our feelings are screaming otherwise. The mature believer, as the sermon concluded, understands that, pouting, avoidance, tantrums, that's kid stuff. Adults should talk. Even though initiating that talk is, frankly, a constant battle against our own flesh, our pride, our fear.
Okay, let's try and synthesize this for everyone listening. We've walked through this kingdom protocol based on Dr. Daniels' teaching. What are the maybe 4 key characteristics of how a mature believer approaches conflict?
I think we can boil it down. The mature approach means handling these conversations. First, confidentially. You go privately first. Second, expeditiously. Don't wait around. The offended person needs to initiate.
Get it done.
Third, continually. Be persistent. Go back again with witnesses if the first attempt fails. Don't give up easily.
Okay.
And fourth, resolutely. Work towards a conclusive agreement. Aim for resolution and closure, even if it's just agreeing to disagree peacefully.
Confidentially, expeditiously, continually, resolutely. That's a great summary. And it brings us right back to that core decision, doesn't it? This is what we really need to leave you, the listener, thinking about today. The sermon really forces us to ask ourselves, do I genuinely want healing? Do I want restoration in this relationship or situation? Or do I maybe just want to feel better by getting a co-signer, someone to agree with me and validate my anger?
Because that search for validation, while understandable, often completely derails the search for actual peace and resolution.
It does. And that leads right into the final sort of provocative thought Dr. Daniels left hanging there.
Yeah, the idea that resolving conflict is genuinely one of the hardest things we do. because it's always a fight against our natural inclinations, our pride, our fear.
So here's the question to mull over.
Yeah.
How much of your own potential, maybe your blessing, your peace, is currently being, what's the phrase, held in escrow?
Held in escrow, yeah, like delayed or withheld.
Right, held in escrow simply because you're maybe too proud or too timid to initiate that difficult but necessary conversation required to move forward. That burden of unresolved stuff,
Yeah,
it's heavy.
it really is. Something to consider.
Go in peace, be blessed, and may the joy of Jesus be yours. We'll see you next week.